The goal of this podcast is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. And we do that every week by sharing the stories and advice of those who are rocking it on the other side. Hey, we also have an ongoing creative award show called the Crowbar Awards, which is a new creative challenge and new guest judge every 3 months. If you win it, you get to come on the show and talk with the guest judge. And hey, we even send you a blue crowbar. There's gold, silver, and bronze as well. It's a great way to break in to the industry. And welcome back to ADjunct, the segment where we try to save you hundreds of dollars by bringing in the best advertising educators and extracting their best advice to your ears. And guess what? It costs $0. So we talk with Kevin Christophersen. Kevin is an associate professor of advertising at Columbia College in Chicago. Columbia is famous for their creative offerings across the world. Specifically, they have an excellent advertising program centered around creativity and preparing students to break in and thrive in advertising. They're located in Chicago, in the heart of it, so they get a lot of students that go into Chicago and across other agencies in the United States, and they do a very good job. I'll be honest with you, after this episode, you might be enticed to transfer or enroll in one of Kevin's classes. He speaks with so much knowledge and practical advice with his agency background, where he started as a receptionist at Leo Burnett and worked his way up the account track. This episode has so many lessons, but I want to thank Kevin first and foremost. In this episode, Kevin opens up and shares his experience of going through a somewhat hellish experience in the ad world. He speaks of a time when he was directly victimized for being himself at an agency, which ultimately brought him to his perfect role as an educator. But it does get real this episode. I can't wait for you to learn how to handle situations working in toxic environments within advertising. While there is no one-size-fits-all approach to dealing with what we talk about in this episode, his story and his outcome can spark your own ideas if you find yourself working in a shitty place. And heck, how to even identify red flags early on, and as well as just amazing advice in general. Kevin has one of the best adjunct episodes that I've recorded to date. So I'm excited for you, and you're going to want to connect with him. And to do that, we have his LinkedIn in the descriptor, and he's always happy to offer career advice. He also has secret resources on our Instagram at Breaking and Entering Pod. Now, on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast, and as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right. Kevin Christophersen, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. How the heck are you doing this morning?
I'm doing really well, Gino. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
So, welcome. Where are you at? What are you up to? How is life? Give me the rundown.
Life is going well. We just are gearing up for our fall semester here at Columbia College Chicago. I've had a little time off this summer, although I'm also the associate chair. So I've been working on some initiatives that we're bringing to our new students. So that's keeping me busy. And I also I'm a consultant on the side. Obviously, all of us at Columbia come from the industry. So whether it be advertising, PR, social, wherever we're at, whatever we're bringing, we all are from the industry. 80% of our adjuncts come to class once a week, teach, and go back to their ad agency, PR firm, etc.
So now do you have some PhD folks that are running the show at all, or is it predominantly?
You know what? So in some areas we do have PhDs.
We're talking advertising marketing though. We'll specialize there.
Yeah, in most cases, no. I have a Master of Arts.
Sure.
But I got that after I started teaching at Columbia.
Yeah. So on this segment, Adjunct, it's called Adjunct, but I've interviewed professors with PhD terminal degrees that have had no industry experience, and then everything in between, from
of course
people that have actually no masters, and they just kind of stumbled into some sort of academia. It seems like you are falling into that category. Professor of practice, lecturer, experience based. So
Correct.
I'm always a little biased, but actually, it's from doing this show. Some of these PhD professors that I've had on are just incredible. I think there's value to both, but I'm
Yeah,
I'm biased for
I
sure.
mean, I've heard, you know, years ago, I started at Northern Illinois University. I went there
Teaching
for,
or
yeah, no, I went there for a year as an
in
undergrad.
DeKalb, yeah.
Yeah, I just did not like these big 300 room lectures. I was not, you don't get into your major until your junior year there. And I was just bored. And so,
Mhm.
ironically, my sophomore year, I was about to go to U of I. And my father at the time had a massive heart attack the day I was supposed to leave.
I'm sorry to hear
And
that.
so he was in the hospital for 2 weeks, almost died. So I was late for the semester. And then I just decided, well, I was so late. Columbia at the time had a late start date.
Hmm.
So I ended up going to Columbia. I had looked at it previously and I knew what it was about. I knew how great their advertising program was. And that's how I ended up at Columbia as an undergrad.
Yeah.
And then I kept, obviously, those networks, which I talk to my students about. Networking is, really key. Kept in
Hmm.
touch with my teachers there. We get into my career in a little bit, but that's how I ended up at Columbia later as an
Sure.
adjunct. Yeah,
And so when you mentioned Northern Illinois, that was where
correct.
you taught. You're hinting at a stint that you taught there, or you went to
I
school
know I
there.
was a student there my freshman
Okay.
year in college, and I went
Okay.
there and so I could compare large universities with professors that
Oh, okay.
don't
Just
necessarily know what they're doing. I'm not saying they're all like that, obviously. Some I had just did not, they were just comms professors, never had industry
mass
experience. And
communications. We see journalism. They kind of bundle those up.
yep,
Um, I think advertising education has gotten more specialized over the years, and I think
it,
that's great. There is an argument that we don't need to get into, but I think there's a really interesting debate of whether or not people should study advertising. I've heard people in the industry say don't study advertising. I guess, do you want to touch upon that? I think they're hinting at like the old school philosophy
yeah,
of
I've
like the
heard this
strat
too. Like,
comms.
oh, if you know a lot about a lot, if you're an artist, if you're a philosopher, if you're a history major, you bring all that into the ad agency and you have different ideas. So I see where they're going with that. But I also tell my students now, in order to create new ideas and think of new things for campaigns, we really need to understand what came before and
Yeah,
get involved in other areas and watch different things, watch documentaries on history, watch
right.
old TV shows.
Minor in something interesting too.
Yeah,
Like English, if you're a copywriter, like American literature is something that I've fallen in love with late in my academic career. And like I'm doing a master's now, and now I'm starting to realize like the classics are interesting. If you have a one up on the side, I think
I
that's really beneficial.
I agree.
If you're just
I
studying ads and you're just looking at what we're doing in the industry, it will create the work that just kind of remains. So you got to kind of look at culture and all these other factors too. So
exactly.
I get there. I get that kind of like that mentality. I do. I love the stories when somebody's a doctor, which we don't hear much of, or they study biology and they spin that narrative, but we can all spin a narrative in a way that seems like a good story and can
Correct.
aid to creating good ads. So, but I want to vouch for studying advertising, especially at a school like Columbia where it is advanced, and I want to get into that is super, super important. So that leads me to a question. I want to know more about what your current role. Well, actually, where are you from? Because you said you're
I
from.
grew up in Skokie, Illinois.
Where did you go to,
Uh,
like the Glenbrooks,
I went to Niles West High School.
Niles West? Okay, just
Um,
Chicago connection. I'm just curious. I
correct.
always like to
Yeah, I
know.
grew up there.
Yeah.
Uh, as I said, my most of my undergrad I did at Columbia. My sophomore year at Columbia, I got a job at Leo Burnett as a receptionist. And
Oh,
at the
nice.
time, Leo Burnett had 35 different floors, still in the same
Yeah,
building,
that
35
whole
West
build.
Wacker.
Yeah, that
Correct.
whole building,
Yeah, but at the time,
the Death
they
Star.
had a receptionist on every floor. And so what I did as a college student, I would work there 2 days a week and take breaks for all the receptionists. So I get a schedule every single day. And then I'd be on different floors. I'd take all their morning breaks, and I'd be on floors for lunch breaks and then afternoon breaks. But what was really beneficial about that is I got to know everybody in that building, and I would take all
Oh,
my work from Columbia, and if I was working on portfolio
show them
pieces,
this.
yeah, and I'd ask them their opinion, and I'd get their advice, and they got to know me.
Heck yeah.
And so that was really, really key in how I just landed my first job in advertising at Leo Burnett. So that from there, I started doing maybe my junior or senior year, I was doing media billing, which I tell my students was the worst job
Delightful.
ever. Worst
That
job
sounds
ever.
awful.
And I was in a little cubicle all day long with invoices, and I'd enter them into a mainframe
Is that
computer.
trafficking? I don't even know what that is.
I don't even, yeah, it was
I
like
don't want to know what that is.
every single ad that Leo Burnett was running on any TV at the time, syndication, wherever it was, it would be billed, and we'd enter it into a system, and then it'd go in a pile, cleared or not cleared. It was just
So when were you doing this? You were doing this like
the
you're
late
like,
90s, late 90s. So
but
90.
like in the context of your academic
I was a
journey.
junior and senior in my academic career. So
Okay, so you went from reception. How'd you get the receptionist role?
I had
Just being in Chicago, made a couple
growing
calls.
up, I was a lifeguard in Skokie, and a girlfriend from the pool
Mhm.
had a family friend who was in charge of all the receptionists and HR.
Hey,
And she was working there over the summer. So
is a receptionist or something a little
she
bit
was
higher up?
she was like a filler like me. So we just took breaks for the receptionist. So we were like, yeah, that's how that happened. So it was a lucky, and the first day at Columbia, that I had a professor who worked at Columbia years ago, and he was telling us about Leo Burnett. I'm sorry, he worked at Leo Burnett years ago.
Sure.
And so that year, I recall this girl who I knew worked there as well. So I called her and said, "Hey, is there any other positions open? I'd love to get in the door there."
Mhm.
HR interviewed me, they needed help. And that's how I landed there my sophomore year. And then from there, as I said, I networked, and they had this media billing job. And it's like, well, it's a little more money. It's not going to be as fun, but it gets me into the media department.
So what role did you ultimately want? Like what you knew you didn't
Ultimately,
want to do media and you knew you
yeah,
didn't want to be a
but
receptionist. So what were you
so
studying and what was the goal?
originally, I wanted to be an art director. I was always interested in art, loved it. Um, I had a portfolio, was
Okay, art
working
director.
with that. And, I'd go to different creative directors at Burnett. Some loved the work, some hated it. It's just so subjective. And I also interviewed later on at other ad agencies.
Of
And,
course.
you hear one opinion from one person. They love this, they hate this, they love this, they hate this. And at the same time, I was in media billing, and I was approached to be a media buyer actually for out of home.
Sure.
And it was my senior year, end of senior year. So
Full-time job.
so I took that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took that, worked on that for a while, still had my portfolio. And
Always
then
crafting, always tweaking it on the side.
correct. But in media at Burnett at the time, it was before it became Starcom, by the way.
Yeah,
So they just spun off. They were just spinning off.
sure.
And I was there 12, 14-hour days. So really crafting my portfolio really took us, it wasn't really happening just because it was
Oh, so
so
that 12
busy.
hours was mainly working on media stuff, and
Yes.
it wasn't the beauty and the romanticism of working late to it was because you
Yeah,
had to get your work done.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then, I did want to, I was always good with meeting with people, client
Yeah.
interface.
You seem like a great account
So
person.
that's where I jumped into. So then I became an account executive, and then I went to two smaller agencies.
Which were in Chicago?
Yeah. One's not there anymore. One was in Bucktown called Heisler Gordon, and one's on Michigan Avenue. And I
Okay.
did that for a while. And I really like that.
So
But
you
going
went from
from
media at Leo in some way, shape, or form. You did that for maybe a couple of years, maybe a couple of months. Who knows
yeah,
how
and
long you
for a
can
while
take that? 12-hour days. I don't know how much I would put up with that doing something I don't necessarily love.
it
But
was a lot.
So
but
you made the switch to a smaller agency in hopes to get maybe an account role or an art director role or just
yeah,
anything
yeah,
else?
yeah, I took the account role.
Just
So
to
I
get
have,
out. I get that. Like
yeah,
when
so
you
I
don't
have
love
also
something.
more time. I wanted more time.
Yes.
And I wanted more experience in Burnett and media. I was doing one thing over and over again. At a large agency, sometimes you're kind of in a vacuum a little bit. I wasn't seeing the clients in my role there. I was
Sure.
maybe I'd be invited to a client meeting and I'd sit there and they'd introduce me.
Take notes
And
and
I wasn't doing much. So I was
sure.
like, but then at the two smaller agencies, there I was basically going to meet the client and handling all the work and making
And then
sure
they
it was.
realize you're a star and like
So then, yeah, so then you have all, you might have, 8 to 10 clients you're working on. So that was exciting for me and I learned a lot. And at the same time, perhaps maybe 99, 2000, I started, someone from Columbia contacted me and said, hey, do you want to teach? We have a position open 1 night a week for a class.
sure.
And, I always loved training people at the agency too.
The
So I
learning and
always liked,
development. Yep.
yeah. So that was always like fun for me.
Yeah.
I think that was really, really what I love to do. And so if I could mirror both, and so I went into the classroom at Columbia for the first time. I was like, I love this. And so it was great. I was still working in an ad agency. I could come once a week down to Columbia. I taught, went
Students
back.
loved it. What
And then,
class were
yeah,
you
I
teaching?
think 2 years into that, someone from Columbia asked me if I wanted to join full time. And I was like shocked, but I thought it was a good time to make that jump.
Why
Uh,
was that?
and it was, when was that?
Why was it a good time to make that jump? Well,
Um,
like personal reasons, you're getting burnt out or maybe
actually,
monotony
yeah,
of the
we could talk about
job.
that. Actually, it's a great conversation. It's another conversation. So the second agency I worked for seemed pretty conservative.
Sure.
And I'm
Smaller
gay.
agency in
I'm
Chicago.
gay. I wasn't out at that moment in time, and it was harder to come out then. And so I had become friends with a copywriter there, and she and I would go out, and apparently they found out I was gay, and so I had a great review. And then 2 weeks later, my boss came in and said, hey, I want to talk to you. This was one morning. And I said, well, what's going on? And she closed the door and she said, things just aren't working out around here. And I was like shocked. I was like, what are you talking about? Wait, I just had this great review. And she said, yeah, but things change. And I'm like, I was still like taken back. It was a Monday morning. Um, and I haven't talked about this on camera, but it's fine.
Hey, no,
Uh,
I appreciate you bringing it up. Yeah.
so I was really shocked. And then she said, there are two other partners in the agency. And I said, well, what about the other partners there? I'm doing great for them. And she goes, yeah, but I've talked to them and you have a choice. You could either work here for the next month while you find another job, or you could leave today. And I said, can I have some time to think about this? She said, no, I need an answer right now. Wow. I'm like, how respectful, by the way. And so then I said,
Holy
it's
cow.
not, she didn't bring up my sexuality, obviously, but I
Right.
tied it right back. It wasn't hard for me. So
Sure.
then I just said, sure, I'll take the month. And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
so the right time, I had this offer at Columbia, which is ironic.
Okay.
And so it was like
Everything
sitting
happens for a
there. And
reason.
so it was kind of like, okay, you know what? This is a great time to try this out. So that's how that happened. Um,
No way.
yeah, it was crazy. And
Sorry to
this
hear
is
that.
2000, 99, 2000. Things have really, really changed in
Yeah.
24 years.
But still, it's not that long ago. And like
I
that's
know
no
it's not, but
excuse.
like it was
Like
so like,
that's bullshit.
yeah, it was terrible. And there's nothing you can do. I
Can
mean,
we
you could, in
can
lots of states, you could still be fired for being
really?
LGBTQ. So it's not like, and there was nothing I could do at the
Do
time.
we
And there's
want to
no
use
group.
this time to call this agency out? Are they still a thing? I don't know. I'm
You
in
know what?
PR and I don't I'm We could definitely.
I can, but better yet, 2 years later, I still had friends at that agency. So
Sure.
about 2 years after that, I walked through that door to see my friends,
Yeah, yeah.
and I saw the person who fired me. I went right up to this person and said, "Hey, how are you? It's so great seeing you. I
Yeah.
just want to tell you the best thing you could have done for me is let me go. It was such a
Right.
gift because I'm doing what I love. So thank you." So I don't have to
Oh,
call them out.
nice.
I think that was like the
It all.
best thing I could have ever done. I'm not going to
Yeah.
hold on to this anger because I
Yeah.
was angry and I never hold on to anger. You have to
Yeah.
if you hold on to anger, you become an angry
Yeah.
person in this world.
Yeah. You
So
can't let it change you. Yeah.
no,
And they win.
correct. So it
Wow.
all worked out for the best, but
I'm so sorry though. I mean, but that's just outrageous to me that you just got a good review and then things switched up in a
correct.
matter like of days, if not weeks. Like that's just
Yeah,
so shocking to me.
it
And
was
I
shocking.
and Kevin, I'm not sure. Like I'm lucky where I work, our leadership totally like that would never happen here, never fly, not that I'm aware of.
No,
But
I
there
haven't
might be
heard of
some
this for,
agencies, out there, I don't know, and that do that. And
I
I guess
mean,
what's your advice if somebody's in a toxic environment like this, and whether or not it's vocalized and as upfront, maybe it's suppressed, and maybe they're putting you off big client
yeah. And
pitches, or like,
so in that
what do you do?
situation, if it's a bigger agency, I'd go to the HR.
Yeah.
But at a smaller agency, there's three owners. There's nothing I can
Yes.
do.
And Kevin,
So at that point, you're
that's something
kind of
that's something that worries me about small agencies. And I don't bring this, I actually have never brought this up. I've interviewed some small agency owners, and I think there's a lot of value in small agencies, but the problem is when it has 1 to 3 owners that can dictate the culture directly by one person, they can
correct.
oversee the work. They can have a lot of say in it. There's that bureaucracy can be safe sometimes and foster creative ideas. When it's 1 to 2 people at the top running the show, they can do what they want. And
Yeah,
sometimes
it's kind
that's
of
suppressing.
it is really it's really, I totally agree with you. And I also tell my students too, sometimes if you're working for a boss, say I came from Burnett, I'm a perfectionist, I'm pretty type A.
Yeah, a little OCD.
And so I go above and beyond. I'm really proactive.
Nice.
And so sometimes it's also a threat, especially at a smaller agency. If your boss is the owner, sometimes they also feel threatened by you. And that could be another thing you feel. And maybe it's suppressed, as you said, or they're taking you off business. But it's interesting to me. Sometimes if you do too much, you're a threat. If you do too little, you're not
Yes.
enough. So where's
Yeah.
that in between balance? And
It's
sometimes you have to learn that, which is,
yeah.
and I've told my students this too. So it's an interesting thing to get into a job and try to understand how you fit and where you could add value
Yeah.
and how much value it can actually bring. And
Yeah, I think what I'm thinking about is like that term, like never outshine the master. I know it's like very like it's bullshit. And I think all of those like politics things, like I hate a world where like you kind of have to like be cognizant of those. But yeah, like you don't want to seem like you're overtaking whoever's in charge, like especially on client calls. There are some boundaries that you need to be aware of. That doesn't mean you got to know the rules to break the rules in
correct.
appropriate ways. But yeah, like I can see how your proactivity, I don't know if that's a word, and like your determination, your passion for this can seem like you're stepping over boundaries and trying to outshine whoever's in charge. I don't I hope I don't ever get in that position. And
Yeah, it's not a great position to be in. And I always say hire better people, hire smarter people because they
yes,
make you look good and they make all
yes,
your work better. So that's how I am, but
yes.
not all people do that.
I
So
want to be the dumbest person in my friend group. I want to be like surrounded by amazing people at work. Like I should never feel like that I'm bringing other people down. I want my people around me to bring me up because they're so great. And like that's a healthy environment where it's not
correct.
competitive, it's collaborative. And that's hard to get.
Exactly.
It's hard to find that. So my question now is did you see any red flags when you first got there at that agency? Was there anything that you would tell your younger self? Obviously, you know now that maybe you wouldn't have gone there, but were there any writings on the wall, hindsight 2020, I know, but what was going on when you first got
Yeah,
there?
some of the work, some of how they were looking at the work, I thought it was conservative. I had another friend there who was talking about the politics of one of the owners. So
That's a red
that's a
flag.
red flag. And
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to get into the political conversation,
No,
but
no, but it's good
even
to know.
then, and politics then were way different than they are now. I mean, it wasn't so, uh, the two sides got along more, but still, there was still a lot, especially with the LGBTQ community back
Mhm.
then, one side, and it's still going on now. I've been looking at advertising and inclusivity in advertising campaigns and the backlash that's going on. I've been kind of
Bud
looking at
Light
that. So I want to
recently.
start doing some research on that. So I've been doing some secondary research. So that's still going on,
Yeah.
obviously, in America. So at the time, yeah, that's a red flag, obviously. And then so I could look back at it and say, this probably isn't going to be a long-term best fit,
Yeah.
but I didn't have any idea that was going to happen.
And the problem sometimes, Kevin, is people, you should do research, right? You should look into who your boss is going to be and their background, if there's been any
Right.
articles or history, talk with other employees. And sometimes even after you do that research and see red flags, the sad truth is with the economy and sometimes the job market, you don't really have a choice.
Correct.
And I would like to say you always have a choice. You can do freelance, and you do, but just I don't want to
But
be
some
ignorant.
people can't afford to do
Right,
freelance, or you're just start out freelancing,
right.
you have to pay for insurance and all these other
Everybody's
expenses.
situations are different, and like who
Correct.
knows, like if they're in debt and they're just graduating, or they paid for it, or they have loans or medical
All
issues,
that.
like
And I was,
they need
a few years
insurance,
out of
and you kind of
college, had student loans. I paid for my college on my own. So
it's
I had all of
terrible.
that to deal with.
That's why I kind of want to back it up now. Like, what can we do as aspiring advertisers to put us in a position of power and leverage? For me, it was my podcast. Um,
Which is great.
Thank you. And it gives me the networking and it gives me credibility for my specific communications area within advertising. That's something that I can rely on now where I don't have to stress too much about if I lose my job, which probably is inevitable in the industry. That's my kind of eventually I'm going to have to find a new job or a new role. Hopefully not. But that's where I can, like, I have peace of mind with this thing that I created, this business that I can leverage and I can get a new job with. It's a promotion tool for myself. So what are some other tools, I guess, like for those starting out that if they do get in a position they can lean back on, or like
You
how
know
can they
what?
build this up?
I tell my students, even in my intro to advertising class, which is called Principles of Advertising, I within the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they're already in teams doing mock campaign for
Crowbar
different
awards.
brands, right? And so we're taking them through how to, do a situation analysis, come up with creative strategy, develop, a 360 campaign,
The fundamentals.
experiential,
Yeah,
social. And by the time that's their first advertising class, that's their first
that's
entry.
great.
But I also say, you know what? You've done this all now. There's lots of small businesses you can go out to that don't know how to do any marketing or advertising. And by the way, you could approach them and help them and then
Yes.
get some work for your own portfolio. And then
Yes.
you're creating work and creating an extra, and maybe you're getting paid, maybe you're not, but hopefully they'll pay you. And then
Yes, they
you have
should.
some, of course. And then you have some income coming in and you know how to do this and you're
Mhm.
practicing your craft, which is really key. So I think those skills that I'm teaching them, I tell them right away, I'm not here to grade your work. I'm not here for to give you an A, B, C. I'm here to help you get a job and be successful in advertising. And
Yes.
so that's my goal for you all.
Right.
That's how I create my
Yes.
classes.
I freaking love that, especially if that's the first class. They need to start um like putting it to work, and it also does not have to be for real clients. I think that for those, especially in art direction and copywriting,
Yeah.
building a body of work, a great portfolio, starting off can be that leverage point. If you have spec campaigns from our Crowbar Awards, shameless
Yep.
plug, or these other award shows, or from your teachers, ask your professors, like, I'm looking for a brief. Can you help me come up with a strategy for something that
Exactly.
and that's a leverage point. Your portfolio is a leverage point. The better that is, the more you can say F off to these conservative agencies that
Correct.
don't align. But
You're
then,
selling your work and you can go wherever you want, hopefully.
yes. But then also looking at yourself as a campaign or a brand as well is something that's super crucial very early on. And that starts with knowing what you want to do: art director, copywriter, strategist, account manager, researcher. I think knowing that early on, and I think that your class, probably that intro class, probably gives them a pretty good line of sight. It's like, okay, I can see myself in one of two areas as a
Correct.
freshman
So
or a sophomore. That is the best like professional advantage you can have, is knowing early.
yeah, and I think in that second module in that class, we go through all the ad agency positions and they do an exercise. And I just throw out a brand that needs help right now, and they're all on teams, and this is just one
Yes.
exercise, and they're all take a different role.
Yeah.
But by the end of that 15 weeks, our
They
class are
should
15
have a
weeks,
pretty good
they have
idea.
a really great idea of where they want to go. And I think that's our competitive advantage at Columbia.
I love it.
We really differentiate in that way. I mean, and then, I've helped some students. I have friends from high school whose kids are graduating college now, and
Yeah.
one just came from U of I, and she's a great artist, and she wants to be an art director. And I looked at her portfolio, but there's no real campaigns.
It's so
So I
hard.
sat down with her several times, and I'm giving her advice, but she almost has to go to portfolio school. And I
Yes.
feel like that we don't, most of our students don't have to do that if they're really focusing on their education here at Columbia, because we really focus on that from day one. You're going to walk out of your intro classes with portfolio work. Yes, you might have to revise and revise and
Of
revise it,
course.
but still,
You're going to have a starting point.
you're
You're going to have the
starting a body of
fundamentals.
work. You're starting
Yes.
a body of work. And by their senior year, I teach a class called Agency. And Agency, I've partnered with 1871. I'm assuming you're aware of
Yeah,
1871.
yeah, that startup, like, it's a really interesting, like,
Yeah, so
startup
they
company.
have about 500 startups.
Yeah, it's like
And
an
I
incubator in Chicago. Yeah.
yeah, so in 2017, I approached them, and each
Oh, that's
semester,
genius. So you're helping out now their startups.
yeah.
You're giving them. I
So
love
each
that.
semester they give us like 25 or 30 clients to look through, and I
Yeah.
choose 4 or 5 depending on the class size. And then my seniors are working on with real startups in real time, doing real work for them.
Yeah.
And so all, the video, whatever they need, it's
Yeah.
being produced and it's out there. And that's a really great experience for them, because I'm basically the account director, and they
Yeah.
are basically 5 teams working on work, and all their problems are significantly different. So they
Yes.
all have different problems we need to solve.
So one team is working on one client, or do they touch
Yeah,
a different? Yeah.
yeah. I used to, for
It's
a
hard
while,
for that short
I
period of
had
time where you get,
have like multiple clients, but
it's hard when you only have a short amount of time and they're students and they're doing other tasks.
correct. And it's
Right.
a 3 hour. Our classes are 3 hours once a week too.
That's
That's another.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're kind of like workshop classes. We're not
Right.
lecturing. I
No.
talk, they do. I talk, they
Yeah.
do.
You're going
But in
over, like,
agency, they're actually, meeting with their clients, either remotely or in person, presenting work. They're they're sending the work to me. I'm reviewing it. They're revising it,
you're
just
like
like
the you're like the chief account executive. I don't know what the term
correct.
is, but they have their mini account executives, right?
Yep.
That might be communicating on the side, knowing, like, okay, this is their actual direction, and you got the strategists like pointing them, and then you got your creatives. I want to do a little tangent here, if you would
Yep.
allow
Of
me.
course.
I think that is beautiful. The fact that real client work, especially for students, is so beneficial, especially for those that are in account and strategy. The problem sometimes is if the creative work, as a recruiter at a large agency, and I've done this and I've looked at portfolios, and the problem is sometimes I don't understand the work because I don't know who the small startup is.
No,
Now,
that makes sense.
that's for mainly, I'm looking at um, I'm looking at art directors and copywriters. I think for those two roles specifically, there needs to be a healthy balance between the real work that, okay, you made actual tangible results. I know that you can interact with the client. I know you can withstand rounds of feedback. But on the other side of it, also in your portfolio of 5 campaigns, ideally you have 5, I want to see some big creative work for some challenger brands personally.
I agree with you.
So if you can get a healthy balance of that spec work and that real work as a creative, which is copyright and art director, then you're going to be in a really, really great spot.
I agree with you.
And I think that you guys are doing that there at Columbia. So I'm not too worried. It sounds like you guys got it under control.
We do. That's what I love about Columbia, and that's what I love about our program. And that's, it needs to be publicized a little bit more. We need to sell that a little bit more. Columbia should be doing that a little bit more, and I think they're going to start.
Now, I just want to, just because I'm curious and something I'm passionate about is the undergraduate education process. I went to University of Illinois. It's a big, large research, a lot of advertising students within it. We had 500 people in our ad club. Everything was great. However, it's hard to, when there's mandated classes and like to specialize in creativity. There are some schools that have tracks that have kind of done a pretty good job with portfolio, like programs within it. So like, how does your program work real high level? Like, can you go and specialize in copywriting or art direction? Can you go and specialize in media and account management?
That is a great question.
I know it's a big one.
For the last 10 years, we had tracks. We had a creative track, a media track, and a strategy track.
Sure.
However, our last dean wanted to dismantle the tracks, and make the education more generalized, which we fought about, because in advertising, as you know, it's very, very specific.
Yes.
And so, and I don't think he really understood even though we've described it, we've explained it, we told him what our competitors are doing and how, what portfolio tools are doing, as a matter of fact.
That's that's a competitor.
We had to rearrange our curriculum, but we have a new dean, and we're now working on putting some concentrations back in place.
My advice,
they're not called concentrations, but basically
electives that you can specialize in. I'm assuming that you can tailor the experience. It starts off with knowing at that first class, okay, I'm interested in copywriting. Even if there's not these distinguished tracks, every student should keep in mind what that role is. The hardest part for a lot of these people is not knowing until their junior year. So that's the goal of this podcast, is educate people to know like the different roles early on and like hound that in. And I will talk with them. You'll talk with them, I'm sure. But then you tailor that whatever that undergraduate major looks like to have those specialties and go out and find it on the side as well. Because even if we do our best in classes, we still need to work on the side. So
that is right. You went to U of I, you said. So were you part of the American Advertising Federation? National Student Advertising Competition?
I didn't do the NSAC. I did. I ran this like specialty club where we had 10 clients, and I was the president of that.
Oh, that's great.
So once again, I've seen a lot of creatives go through my agency when I was a student, and we weren't producing great creative work, mainly because we had local clients. So that perspective, like I almost tell people, like copywriters, find the best art director, pair up early on.
For sure.
Get your dynamic duo going, maybe a strategist in there, and take on these spec work briefs as well as your school work. So that's why we created the Crowbar Awards. The spec award show where you get to meet the guest judge. Like, I thought that was like what was missing in my education. I think they're developing that, but yeah,
that's smart. Because I taught our class that does the NSAC is called practicums, and I taught that, for like 12 years prior to teaching agency. So and we still do that, and Columbia wins regionals yearly and goes to nationals, which is great for such a small program.
How many ad students do you have generally?
It depends. We have under 100 right now, which is not that much,
but it used to be a lot strong. And you're in Chicago, like
it used to be a lot bigger, and we want to grow it a little more.
I want to help with that, so we'll definitely talk on the side. And I hope this podcast kind of illuminates, just like talking with you specifically, probably sheds light on like your knowledge and probably disseminates to the whole program. Like if there are other people like you, like if every lecturer, professor has a similar mindset as you, that's a pretty damn good program.
We have a really dynamic faculty, and
Yeah.
they are really great, and they're
Thomas
really
Kemeny went.
passionate about about helping our students get jobs and succeed in this industry. And
Mhm.
that's also what I love about our program and Columbia.
I love it. This has been a dense, amazing episode, Kevin. So I want to leave it there, and I want to make
Thank
sure that
you.
people can reach out to you, and maybe transfer over to Columbia
Sure.
if they are listening. Like, damn, I don't have this, or maybe they want to go and get another degree, or maybe there's a graduate program that you want to talk with them about on the side. I'm sure there's opportunities, maybe
There are.
certificates as well, something that they can get a little bit of oomph going so
Yeah,
they can break in.
I'd love to talk to.
Yeah, you brought your
I'd love to
students to
talk.
Havas Chicago. That's how we met. We did a
Yep.
tour. Like I know
Yeah,
that
it
this
was
is what you do.
awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, Kevin, how can people reach out to you? LinkedIn, what's your go-to?
So LinkedIn is great. If you want to share my Columbia email, you can.
Yep.
It's Christopherson at colum.edu.
And I will every, local Chicago people, I know this is like the heart of my audience. I will make sure that they come and meet you and you can help them out. So I
That'd be
really, really,
terrific. I really appreciate that.
heck
And
yeah.
I love to help other students.
Amazing, amazing episode. Thank you again, Kevin. This has been so, so great. And thanks for opening up and being so transparent with us. And
No, thank you. I wasn't expecting that, but I think it's
yeah,
important to hear.
heck yeah. Thank you.